Mountaineer Nation, let's ride.
But Don Nealon's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels fear to tread. As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of WVU Football. Here is Harris in trouble. Stiff arms the would-be tackler. Comes out over the 25 to 20. Goes around about it to 15 to 10 to 5. A touchdown, West Virginia. He did it.
Takes the Slater one-on-one with the defender. Look at Pat White.
West Virginia football. You know what that's about. They don't know what it's about. West Virginia football. Football, people. They can shoot up on fire. No more air in the helmet.
Let them know. Leave no doubt tonight. Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Boot.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
And now, the show brought to you by Mountaineer fans for Mountaineer fans, the Country Roads Webcast.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the CRW podcast here for our Season 5 finale. Hard to believe it's already the final episode of Season 5, but hyped to switch gears to Season 6 because that means a new season of Mountaineer football starting up. That's how we kind of run this thing. Once we hit the season prediction roundtable in August, that means it's time for a new season of the podcast. So this will be our final episode of Season 5 here. Episode 159, our main topic is going to be discussing the preseason depth chart that West Virginia included in their digital media guide ahead of Big 12 Media Days. And we'll get to that later on in the episode. But before we do, we've got plenty of Mountaineer sports topics to talk about, covering baseball, basketball, and, of course, a couple other football things we want to talk about. But before we get there, Brad, glad to have you on, man, as always. You guys know where to find him on Twitter, at Big Bubba Brad, CRW there, as you see on the screen if you're watching on the video side. But appreciate you joining me here for episode 159. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. I'll say it feels good. I've, gotten back a little bit more consistent, been showing my face a little bit more. So I'm excited to get the preseason roundtable going. That's always a big fun one.
Oh,
so
my favorite.
It's starting to get that time of year again, man. It's getting exciting.
Absolutely. Starting to get that itch. You can tell it's getting close. Fall camp will be starting up here in, just about a week or so. So, we're pretty much there. But before we get into those Mountaineer sports topics, Brad, there is one thing I want to discuss that deals with the conference that West Virginia is in. And, of course, that's Big 12 news that's actually broken today, the day that we're recording this episode. And by the time you listen to this may have already gone official because according to reports, it could come out as early as the day after the day we're recording this. Pete Thamel was the first one I seen break this on Twitter. ESPN then shared an article, but just recently, just ahead of us recording, Brett McMurphy, who formerly used to work at ESPN, put out on Twitter, he now works for the Action Network, that Colorado leaving the Pac-12 to return to the Big 12 in 2024. Colorado will receive the full Big 12 share, $32 million from the ESPN Fox media deal. The Buffaloes left because of Big 12 stability and Pac-12's uncertainty, sources said, and it says an announcement would come tomorrow. Of course, like I said, the day after we're recording this. So, a lot of smoke around this earlier, Brad. Now it seems like even some reports are coming out saying it's all but official. But how do you feel about the Big 12 apparently, expanding again? We thought we were going to drop down to 12 teams with Oklahoma and Texas leaving after this year, but it looks like be at least 13 with Colorado coming in. And I'd say if that's happening, then maybe at least a couple more Pac-12 teams on the horizon. So we could be looking at even a bigger Big 12 conference than the 14 teams we'll be seeing this season. But that remains to be seen. But what we can't talk about probably is Colorado, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders coming to the conference, it looks like. How are you feeling about that, Brad?
I think it's going to be exciting. Again, if you guys have watched for any consistency, you know that I'm really skeptical about the product that's going to be put out in Coach Prime's first or second year, and quite frankly, hoping that it's not going to work. But it's exciting nonetheless. Whether you want it to work or not, it's still something that everybody's going to be watching and seeing what happens. And it's more from a perspective of the Big 12, I think that it's a great thing. I think that, brings more eyeballs. People are going to be excited to know that we're still growing. And I think that that's, Brett Yormack is still just doing an absolute stunning job of building this conference up into a real powerhouse. And, I think that we've got a lot of exciting things coming. I think you've got a sleeping giant in Houston, and, we're really making all the right moves to become a really exciting football conference still, and I do think that this is just going to be the first domino to fall of a few of the big of the Pac-12 schools, but I am curious to see how fast that kind of train keeps moving. I know that there's also been some rumors swirling about UConn and kind of things along those directions.
Gonzaga, even for basketball only, has been rumored as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like one of those things where if the rest of the Pac-12 tries to hold in it, bring in San Diego State and do what they can to hold together, I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of went that direction,
Yeah, they're going to have to do something to try and, withstand this, because they're going to be in a similar position to what, the Big 12 was in when Texas and Oklahoma left. But I think it may be even worse for them because they already have, two of their big names, USC and UCLA, on the way out. But, when the Big 12 had that happen with Texas and Oklahoma, they quickly filled it in with other schools before anyone else left. Now at this point with, Colorado leaving, and like you said, I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe Arizona State, some teams like that try and come to the Big 12 as well. The Pac-12, I don't want to say it's doomed, but it's certainly on its last leg, it appears right now. And, you hate to see that. You hate to see power conferences go away. But the bright side of it, for West Virginia is I think that this certainly looks like the Big 12 has positioned itself to be one of those big time, super conferences, if you want to call it that, that's going to be forming here in the next few years, and certainly be in the mix as a, power conference in college football playoff discussions, what have you, with the Big 10 and the SEC. I think the Big 12's throwing their hat right into that rink. And like you said, hats off to Brett Yormark for, that and the things that he's accomplished in his short time being the commissioner already. But having said that, we'll dive in on some Mountaineer news now. Definitely just wanted to touch on that breaking news that definitely affects college football, as we're now actually, a month away from the start of college football, the day that we're recording this episode. So that certainly affects college football nationally, but also affects West Virginia directly, with it being the conference that they're in, that Colorado appears to be joining. So some Big 12 conference news, but we'll get set to dive in here on our Mountaineer news segment, where we're going to talk about multiple Mountaineer sports. Like I said, some baseball news, basketball news, to go along with a couple football topics before we dive in on our main topic there with the depth chart discussion. But before we hit our Mountaineer news segment, just want to remind you guys, if you're tuned in on YouTube, whether it's on the Country Roads Webcast channel or on WV Sports Now, be sure hit the like button. Really helps it. Hit the YouTube algorithm, pushes it out to more people, helps the video perform better. And be sure subscribe if you haven't already. If you're a WVU fan, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. And if you're tuned in on the audio side, we appreciate that as well, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, you name it. You can find the Country Roads Webcast there. But if you're there, leave us a rating. That really helps us there on the audio side. But we appreciate you whether you're tuned in to the video side, audio side, or if you go straight to WVSportsNow.com and find us there. We appreciate that also. And that's one of the best places you can find a lot of great Mountaineer sports content. So be sure, head over there to WVSportsNow.com, where we will be referencing their site for a lot of our upcoming articles here in the Mountaineer news segment. But having said that, with no further ado, let's dive in on Mountaineer news. All right, so leading off Mountaineer news with some breaking news for the baseball program. I think that this was kind of unexpected. I don't think a lot of people saw this coming this offseason. West Virginia, we know, had an unexpected coaching change on the basketball side. It now has, one to go along with that on the baseball side. However, this one will be a much smoother transition, as Randy Mazie just kind of announced this will be his final season with the Mountaineers. He's going to retire after the 2024 season, but a succession plan is already in place, as you see written by Mike Ostie in this article over on WVSportsNow.com. The program will be turned over to assistant coach Steve Sabins. And from all accounts that I've heard, a lot of this just goes to how highly West Virginia thinks of Steve Sabins and how highly sought after he is by other baseball programs around the country. But it's also kind of bittersweet to see, Randy Mazie's tenure at WVU come to an end, in my opinion, just because he's really built this thing. I know back in 2013, I believe it was, West Virginia was debating on ending the baseball program completely, but decided instead to, double down and buy in, build a stadium, and get a coach that would really try and build this program. And Randy Mazey has certainly done that. As you see, a decade later, West Virginia having the best season in school history, arguably, and now having a great chance to be successful again in 2024 in what will be Randy Mazey's final season. But having said that, Brad, any thoughts on the breaking news of Randy Mazey retiring as the West Virginia baseball coach and Steve Sabins taking over as his successor following next season?
Yeah, having not been the biggest baseball fan in the world, like to watch it, just never really was into it that much. It's still impossible to not see what Randy Mazey has done for the West Virginia University men's baseball team. He really kind of put us on the map, really established a program where there was none, and has really been the driving force behind that. And the kind of professionalism and product that he's brought to that athletic program is just absolutely unparalleled. And so it'll be really sad to see him go. And I think he's going to have one more really good run at it with J.J. Weatherholt coming back. I think that he's going to have a team that's really energized and behind him, and he's going to have a chance to even do better than he did this year, honestly, and go out on an extremely high note and go out as one of the greatest sports coaches in West Virginia sports history, if I'm being honest. So, absolutely can't thank him enough for what he's done for this program. And as you alluded to, people seem to be really high on Sabins. They said that he was one of the main recruiters when it comes to J.J. Weatherholt and some of the other all-stars that we've put, honestly, into the MLB. You look at people like Alex Manoah and stuff like that, though he hasn't had a great year this year with the change in pitching clocks and stuff like that. They have still had quality talent and produced quality talent coming through there. So they seem to have full faith in him and that. And, at that point, I trust that. I think that I just come to the point where why now kind of thing? Is it just that time for Mr. Randy Mazey, or is it, one of those things where you can kind of see the mess that's happening around the athletics department as it stands right now? And, not to speculate or anything like that, but you couldn't blame a man for not wanting to really, I can kind of see it as his time to go ahead and step out of that situation as well. But Ren Baker is going to have his whole athletic department. I mean, it is going to be his through and through, man. I mean, there's not going to be many athletics that haven't had his fingers on them now after the next 2 years, potentially.
Yeah, well, that's what's going to be crazy is we're going to see, like I said, I got fingers crossed for Neil Brown to be able to turn around this season. And we'll talk more about the football team here coming up later on, but I think that they've got, a chance to prove some people wrong, and we'll see if he's able to turn it around. But we all know he's on the hot seat, and if he's not able to turn it around, then you could potentially be looking at West Virginia breaking in a new coach in, all three of these sports we're going to talk about here on this episode: baseball, basketball, and football. It's certainly believed they will be in baseball and basketball already with the interim coach in place, and then
and women's basketball too, right?
Yeah, women's basketball coach, new one this season. So yeah, it's going to be definitely like you said, could be a completely Ren Baker's athletic department when it's all said and done. We'll see what happens on the football side, but in terms of the baseball news, I think that, like I said, they seem to have high hopes for Saban. So I'm excited to see what he does. Just like you said, I've never really been too much of a baseball fan, but that just goes to show how good this West Virginia team was the past couple of seasons and the job Randy Mazey's done, because he's gotten me involved to the point where I've even, watched and listened to games, which is something I've never done, for baseball at any level personally. So it's definitely it goes to show why Randy Mazey deserves his flowers for the job he's done at West Virginia. But hopefully, with it being announced ahead of the season, it sets up a scenario where they're extra motivated to go out and, like you said, win big for him. And I know you mentioned J.J. Weatherholt, and he's coming back for one final season at West Virginia, the superstar that he was, not draft eligible yet, but will be following this season. And in a way too early mock draft, he was projected as high as the number 2 overall draft pick in the MLB draft. So I think we could be looking at a potential top 5 major league draft pick coming out of Morgantown in J.J. Weatherholt following this upcoming season, Brad. And like you said, he's an absolute superstar, and he's, I think, one reason maybe Randy Mazey wanted to hang it up maybe after this season, right? But when you got J.J. Weatherholt coming back, you can't not stick around and see what happens for that season, because with a player as talented as him, he could really carry you to a special season.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool to see him projected as a number 2 overall draft pick. So if he goes out and has a good year to even match what he did last season, who knows what could happen. And that would be really awesome for the future of West Virginia baseball. And, like we said, with Saban's taking over, really would just be a good way for him to hit his stride if he, ends up producing a top 5 draft pick in JJ Weatherhold, who, as Brad mentioned, he really was big in the recruitment of as well as a lot of these West Virginia players on the roster. So fingers crossed for another successful baseball season to send Randy Mazey out on a high note as he deserves. Certainly looking forward to it and hoping for the best. But having said that, let's switch gears now and switch over to West Virginia basketball. Certainly a lot of news has happened since the last time we got a chance to chat, not the least of which is something that broke in the past few days. So we'll lead off with that. West Virginia had seen some transfers depart since Bob Huggins decided to resign. Not many of which decided to return. Only Kirk Kriisa had done that to this point. But now we get Jose Perez following in those footsteps, announcing that he will return to West Virginia. And I think this is big, Brad. I mentioned the biggest thing for me was keeping Raekwon Battle, Kirk Kriisa, and Jesse Edwards. But right up there on that list, if there's your 1A, then I think getting Jose Perez and keeping him was probably 1B, because he has really good potential for this team, and this is a guy that's going to be a starter for you. So, keeping the big teams that were after him away, a lot of big names, Michigan, Gonzaga, were reported to be after him. I think that this was another great job by Jay Kuntz and this staff, and Jay Kuntz is doing a great job rebuilding this roster. He built it for Bob Huggins. Now he's rebuilding it, and he's doing a great job doing that as well, I think.
Yeah, I think it really speaks volumes when you got a player that willingly agrees to come back and play, after everything that happened. And I think that it really it made me feel more comfortable in the fact that our basketball season still got a lot of potential, even though we were keeping, like you said, Kirk Kriisa, Raekwon Battle, and Jesse Edwards together. The fact that somebody else was like, this isn't an absolute mess, I'm still willing to stay and kind of pound this out, is a good feeling for me, because after everything that happened, you can't blame anybody for kind of wanting to go, and I don't fault any of the basketball players that have left, but to have somebody still willing to come back, even after you said the interest from Michigan State, Gonzaga, multiple others, to just still say, hey, no, West Virginia is where I want to be, is awesome. And shame on all the fans that gave him a hard time for thinking about leaving.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, when he remains loyal, returns. And I love to see it. And I think it just sets up, for what could be, I still believe, a successful season despite the turnover that's happened among the staff and, of course, among the roster, and continuing discussing that roster as they try to rebuild it. And we talked about Jay Kuntz and the great job he's done as the recruiting coordinator for West Virginia basketball. Recently, they just picked up another commitment, and he has been officially announced as a signee now in a press release put out by the university, and that is Quinn Slazinski, who will likely play the forward position for West Virginia this upcoming season. Great potential to start for the Mountaineers, I do believe, this season. Had committed to St. John's, actually. Previously played for Rick Pitino at Iona, and then had committed to play for him at St. John's. But at the very last minute, of course, switching to the Mountaineers and just choosing to come to Morgantown. Great news for West Virginia. 6'9", 215-pound guy. Put up great numbers, 12 points, I do believe. 11.3 points and 5 rebounds. So great figures there. And I think, similar type of game to maybe a Trey Mitchell type, but I think he maybe even has a better outside shot than what we saw from Trey Mitchell. But all in all, I think this is a great pickup for West Virginia. Slazinski's a guy that began his career at Louisville before going to Iona, and then now finds his way to West Virginia, Brad. But any thoughts on the roster as it continues to shape up now with the addition of Slazinski? West Virginia probably only looking for, one more piece or two to add to this thing. It looks like they really have went out and rebuilt this thing in a great way.
Yeah, I think it's definitely good that we're getting some more size in there. I think that's where we're really weak at right now with James Okonkwo leaving and God, who's the other one? It's been a minute since Muhammad Wagi, yeah. And it's just, I'm glad to see that they're kind of picking that up, but I still think that that's my one major area of concern. I think anybody that's kept up with the basketball program is thinking that right now. It's just, man, who's going to play down low for us? So it's good to see us picking up a 4, maybe try to find another 5 with one of those 2 positions. But it's exciting. I mean, Slazinski seems like a pretty good pickup. I didn't really watch him that much at Iona, but I think there's a lot of potential there, and with adding some more unknown to this team, I think that can only make you more dangerous. And, as I come back to the point that I've said since this has kind of happened is even before Bob Huggins' issue happened, is that it's all going to come down to how well the team gels and how much they can all get behind, a similar message and focus and drive and really put out the same kind of consistent product that they would need to make a good run at it.
I'd agree 100% because it's still – a lot of new pieces. Before it was a lot of new pieces, but now maybe even more so where you've had to rebuild it since, all the turmoil that's happened among the coaching staff. But I don't know. I won't say West Virginia's maybe rebuilt it better than it was before, but I think that it's certainly neck and neck with where they were prior to all the coaching turmoil that happened. I think, you still have some losses that I think really hurt Toussaint and Trey Mitchell, off the top of my head, maybe at the top of that list, but I do like the pieces they've brought in as replacements. Jeremiah Bembry from Florida State is a very lengthy point guard, 6'7", that I think is going to do good as the reserve point guard, trying to fill in that role that Toussaint kind of had, and then Slazinski maybe taking some of those minutes from Trey Mitchell and hopefully making that loss negligible. But then I think West Virginia isn't done yet. I think look out for West Virginia to potentially add one more big man at least. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see them even try and add a couple more pieces, but I think they're after one more big man to add to this roster. And lastly, for basketball news here in our Mountaineer News segment, we got to talk about the men's basketball schedule for the upcoming season finally being released with the new additions to the Big 12 Conference. We saw West Virginia in football be one of the only teams that plays all 4 of the new additions in football. Of course, in basketball, we wanted to see how they would break this up. And the way that they've decided to do that is West Virginia will play Cincinnati, Kansas State, Texas, TCU, and UCF, both at home and on the road. Then West Virginia will play Baylor, BYU, Kansas, Texas Tech in Morgantown. And then West Virginia will play only away games at Houston, Iowa State, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State. So I think that this kind of shapes up favorably for West Virginia. And the main reason that sticks out to me is you don't have to go play at Kansas and you don't have to go play at Baylor. And I think that those are always 2 of the tougher Big 12 teams and 2 of the tougher Big 12 venues. But I don't know if you got a chance to see this, Brad, before now, but what are your thoughts on West Virginia's kind of draw with this new Big 12 schedule for basketball?
Yeah, I had not seen it until now, so it's really exciting to see the fact that we're not going to have to go to the fog. Getting Kansas at home has been a good thing for us up until, the last couple of years. We were undefeated, I think, for like 5 years in a row against Kansas at home or something like that along those lines. So I was there to witness quite a few of those myself when I was in Morgantown, getting to see some absolutely insane games against Kansas and getting to storm the court a couple times. Can't beat that kind of feeling. So I'm glad that our fans are still going to get an opportunity to do that. I think that the home against some and away against some is definitely an interesting take. Really curious to see how that's going to play out. I know it's probably a little bit more in tune where some other programs were, or the other conferences were. I honestly couldn't tell you. But yeah, being able to get Kansas and Baylor strictly at home and not having to travel there as well is exciting. I would also say not having to travel to BYU is also a pretty good benefit there. Not having to go to that extreme length at all is definitely beneficial. So
that's a good point.
Iowa State, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State and Houston are no gimmies as away games, but I definitely think that we're catching the better side of the draw for the people we have to play at home.
I agree. I think that, West Virginia got a good draw for this time. And the interesting thing about it is normally you would say, okay, this is going to be flipped. Next year they'll play, the teams that are playing away at home and vice versa. But you got to think it's going to be a completely different conference. So West Virginia just got the luck of the draw this time, and who knows how it's going to shape up moving forward. But, we got some teams on the way out and looks like some new teams maybe on the way in, and we'll see what happens with Big 12 expansion as far as that goes, especially with the Big 12 maybe potentially going after some basketball-only programs. But as far as what we know now for the upcoming season, I agree with you. I think avoiding the fog is the biggest standout to me with West Virginia's draw on this schedule, and I like it. I like it for West Virginia, but that's what we got as far as basketball news is concerned. So talked a little baseball, talked a little basketball news here in our Mountaineer news segment. Now we have a couple football news topics we want to touch on before we get into our main topic, where we discuss the newly released preseason depth chart. But before we do that, I think one of the main things that we got to talk about, Brad, is that preseason Big 12 media poll predicting West Virginia to finish last in the conference. I think we all disagreed with that immediately. I think as West Virginia fans, we know how hard it is to come into this conference as a newcomer, and West Virginia was coming from a Power 5 conference. These new members are not coming from a Power 5 conference, so they might even struggle worse than what West Virginia did. So I certainly would have expected West Virginia to be ranked at least among the newcomers. The media didn't see it that way. West Virginia voted 14th in the conference poll, and Neil Brown appeared to take offense to it at Big 12 Media Days, going as far as guaranteeing West Virginia won't finish last in the Big 12 conference, as did some of the players that were there, as you see detailed in this article by Mike Ostie over on WVSportsNow.com. But Brad, what did you think about the Big 12 media poll when you first saw it and saw West Virginia predicted last? And then what did you think about Neil Brown's reaction to said media poll and his guarantee that they wouldn't finish last?
I mean, I was caught off guard by it a little bit, but I'm not entirely surprised. I think that a lot of people are looking at this season and they're not looking at it as, oh, Neil Brown is going to go 4-8 this year. You know what I mean? I think it is, oh, Neil Brown is going to go 1-4, be fired. Team's going to go into utter chaos. And from there, we've got no chance. This is definitely reading a writing on the wall kind of thing. It's not, them saying, oh, our team has no chance of winning. It's saying, oh, I think that our team is going to be looking for a head coach in the middle of the season. I think that is impacting a lot of it. I will also say that, if you look at the prior years worth of Big 12 records, the best we've done against those odds are 3 spots above. And, even at this point, you're finishing 11th, right? So, not only can we not finish last, we can't finish 13th. We can't finish 12th. Finishing 11th is not going to save Neil Brown's job.
Right.
So it's one of those things where you can sit there and say, oh, I don't believe those. We're not going to finish last. You can say that as much as you want to, right? You can absolutely say, oh, well, we're not going to finish last. If you finish 11th, Neil Brown, you might as well be last at this point. 5 years in, we shouldn't be sitting to where we're, oh, I'm going to prove them wrong and be 9th best in the conference. That's just not at the point where we're at. That's not the point that's acceptable. And, I like the fire. I like the energy. But to be frank, up until this point, you've not shown me any other reason to believe that you're going to finish better than 11th.
True. It's hard to disagree with you there. And I think, as you said, that's him saying that they won't finish last doesn't really, say much if they finish, like you said, 11th, 12th, 13th. I think you certainly need to be competing for at least top half of the conference, if not, 8th at the very least. We'll see what happens. But one thing I will say is, of course, it's coming that time where you start to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit, maybe wear the golden blue glasses a little bit. But to me, it just seems a little bit different. I sense a little bit different energy with this team in the past, because I think a lot, over the past couple years, it's been, hearing it a lot from the staff. But I think even when you see the player interviews and you hear them talk, it's, body language and just the way they say things. It seems like this team will have a chip on their shoulder. It seems like that they are seeing a lot of this negative press that they're getting. You had the anonymous Big 12 coach earlier in the offseason refer to us as a MAC team. Now you see it's getting picked last in the Big 12 conference. And I heard on another podcast, I think it might have been the In the Gun podcast, Jorden talking about Neil Brown even pointing out, at Big 12 Media Days that all 13 other Big 12 schools had a color-coded flag at Big 12 Media Days, but West Virginia was the only one that didn't. And so it seems like that he's just picking up on little things of them being slighted, by the media and everything. And so that's the one thing I've said when I've seen those things throughout this offseason is I hope that they're using it as bulletin board material, and we're going to see a team that really comes out, with a different type of physicality, a different type of hustle and mentality, just a completely different attitude than what we've seen. And, kind of really has that Mountaineer mentality, if you will. And I think that the chips are certainly on the table to where it's set up for them to be able to do that. Now, if they come out and do that, that remains to be seen. But I'm certainly getting the sense from this team that they have a different type of energy to them and that they're picking up on that, quote unquote, bulletin board material as well. And I think they're going to come out hungry and maybe really surprise some people. So, although I completely agree with what you're saying, him guaranteeing they don't, won't finish last doesn't really mean much if they finish 10 to 13th. But I'm sensing that, he's pissed off, just as I'm talking about with these players. And I think that this team has a chance to come out and be a top half of the conference team, honestly. I also think they have a good chance to finish, 10 through 13th. It's hard to predict with this team, but they have a certain air about them that I really like, that they may come out with a chip on their shoulder, I think.
Yeah, I think that, the only thing that's going to kind of clothesline that is the fact that you don't have much time. You don't have any room for mistakes. There is no room for error. You probably get a pass for Penn State, but after Penn State, there is no more passes. Right. It is win or lose your job. It's honestly at that point. And so, if you come in, you're not going to have the odd possibility of saying, okay, guys, I know that I'm 2-3. I know that I'm 1-4, but if you just keep believing, then when we hit this 5-game stretch in the middle of our season, we're going to have a chance to really, show them who we are. You just don't have that luxury. You just don't. And so, again, he can be upset about it as much as he wants to, but until he proves people otherwise, I don't think he has a right to be, feel slighted, honestly. But
yeah, I can't disagree with you there. That's why I said this is his, year to go out and show it. It's completely, pretty much his team fully now. And he's saying the right things throughout this offseason, but, he's always said the right things. We're just looking for the wins to, go along with that this season. And hopefully this is the year that he finally backs it up and turns it around, because I'd love to see it. But like you said,
trust me, I want to see that. So, and people can say what they want to, but I want to see that so bad. I want Neil Brown to succeed more than anything on this earth. I love the guy. I love his attitude. I love the way he approaches his program. I love the kind of culture he's built. I love everything about Neil Brown other than the win column. Unfortunately, that's the only column that matters.
Yeah, that is. And I think everyone would agree with you. And, that's the issue. Everything's there but the win. So, fingers crossed, finally turns it around this season. But speaking of that, this make you feel some type of way in regards to that. I think that a lot of us maybe saw this coming. I know even as early as the end of last season, we talked about it when we knew that he would be returning, that we kind of expected he may do this because, just to be frank with you, if I was in his position, I would probably, make the same choice, because if I'm going to go down, it's going to be me in control of my destiny, because I'm going to trust me probably, ahead of anyone else. And it seems like Neil Brown's really betting on himself as well. We knew Chad Scott got promoted to offensive coordinator. Throughout the spring, he had some play calling duties, but as far as when the fall comes around, Neil Brown also announced at Big 12 Media Days that he is going to handle the play calling duties for the offense yet again in 2023. I know a lot of people are really kind of down on this, Brad, because, Neil Brown's early offenses weren't very good. But, my counter to that is there weren't really the pieces there. We haven't seen Neil Brown call an offense when he has an offensive line like what West Virginia is going to have this season, which is going to be the best in 5+ years at West Virginia probably. And to really have the dual threat quarterback like he really wants to play with, loaded running back room. So certainly this is going to be a different offense than what we've seen Neil Brown work with at any time yet at West Virginia, is my counter to what everyone's, feels so negatively about this. But I do understand, why they would feel that way. But what camp are you in there, Brad? Are you kind of on the fence and just waiting to see how it turns out?
I'm not surprised by this. I think that if I were in Neil Brown's shoes, I would be doing the exact same thing. Quite honestly, it's up to me to fix it. This is on me. This is my job on the line. Like, I'm going to be the one that kind of runs away with it. To kind of counter that Kool-Aid, to be a little Kool-Aid counter, I would say that my big gripe with Neil Brown has not been necessarily the play calling as much as it has been the undisciplined kind of play.
Game management.
The mistakes, the things that absolutely shoot yourself in the foot. And, those are things that, you've got a great quality offensive line now, but it doesn't matter if we're getting a delay of game penalty because we can't get a call in. If we can't get right timeouts, if we're punting the ball on a 4th and 1 at the 40-yard line, on probably the biggest game up to your career at that point. You know what I mean? And those are things that that's not going to get better with a better team. That's going to get better with better coaching. That's kind of where I stand at that. And, I believe in him to make those play calls, and I think that this team is better fit for him to kind of as a fan, when Neil Brown came in, it felt so vanilla because you're coming from a Dana Holgorsen teams that are high-flying, air-it-out offense that's just like absolutely electric to watch, and Neil Brown's offenses just haven't been that. That's not what he runs. He has the air raid, but he really never had the talent or the ability to kind of make that kind of pop. Right. Even last year where you bring in Graham Harrell that's supposed to be doing the same, you still just didn't see it, But I think that having seen that for the last few years, I do think that Neil Brown is going to have the easiest time of his life calling these plays because he's got a stud offensive line that should be able to push around anybody in the Big 12, and he's got a dominant running back room and, an absolute unknown threat at quarterback. People know it's scary. They're not going to be excited about it. And so I think that he's going to be able to make the plays work, and that's going to be best for him because, he's actually able to run an offense the way he wants to. But like I said, for me, it comes back to, the play calls. I can deal with vanilla, but I can't deal with stupid penalties. Yeah. And to me, that's just, you can call plays, Neil Brown, but I need you to call timeouts when you need to. And I need you to kind of, clean up the other mistakes when it comes to coaching.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's certainly probably one of the main things I'm watching this season. Because I said, to me, that's what's really stood out is because when the hire of Neil Brown was touted, it was how disciplined he was, how detail-oriented he was, and we just haven't seen that on the field. We've seen constant, costly false start penalties, delay of games, like you said, weird time management scenarios, you name it. So I'm hoping to see that change this year, hopefully, with more veteran players, more disciplined players that have been in his system now for a few years. We'll see, kind of the flip side of that coin. But like you said, I think that's the main concern for me. I'm not really concerned about this offense overall. I'm a little bit concerned about the passing game if I had to pinpoint an area. But I think overall this offense is going to be able to, move the ball and score points personally. But having said that, I guess that will pretty much wrap us up here with our Mountaineer news segment as we've covered some baseball news, basketball news, and some football news. So with that being said, we will get ready to dive in on our main topic here on Season 5, Episode 159 of the CRW podcast as we discuss the newly released preseason depth chart. All right, so if you're watching on the video side, you can see shared on the screen here. This is from the university's official digital media guide for the 2023 WVU football season. They do have a preseason depth chart included in said media guide, and me and Brad just kind of wanted to look at it. Going to break it down on each side of the ball. We're going to start with the offense here. And just, Brad, I wanted to see, just looking at this, what stands out to you? What do you think will change, by the time fall camp comes around, or what would you like to see changed? Just kind of early takeaways from this, way too early, if you will, preseason depth chart in terms of the offensive side here.
Honestly, offense isn't that surprising to me. I guess you do technically have the Jalen Anderson over Justin Johnson, which you know how I feel about that. You know what I mean? For those that don't know, me and Jorden got an ongoing battle. I'm a big JJ fan. He's a big JA fan. We would both love to see either one of them succeed, but we're both putting in our bets to see who's actually going to be the number 2. But outside of that, no, nothing really catches me off guard on this list. I do think that we're going to see a lot of Rodney Gallagher, personally. I think that he's going to definitely get some playing time his freshman year. I don't know how you keep an electric player like that off the field, especially when you're going to be running the ball a lot, adding in that ability between him and Jeremiah Aaron for some sweeps and some, things along that nature. I definitely think that we're going to see Rodney Gallagher get a chance at it. But yeah, outside of that, it's, nothing's really catching me off guard here. I guess maybe the fact that Landon Livingston is not 300 pounds yet. You got to get that steak in you, boy.
That's interesting.
Let's get up there some,
I didn't
296.
see that one. Yeah, that
294, yeah. I like Landon a lot, so I'm really excited to see his name finally on the list a little bit here. So,
oh yeah, center of the future.
Definitely one of potentially for sure.
Potentially. Oh yeah, he's got the high ceiling. He's got the potential for sure. Yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of this offensive side of the depth chart was pretty much straightforward to me. I think the only thing that really stood out when I first looked at it, other than the number changes for some of the players, including Jalen Anderson, my guy you talked about earlier, big fan of him in the backfield, going to be wearing number 0 this year. But I did a video discussing all the jersey number changes. If you want to check that out over on the Country Roads webcast, YouTube, be sure to hop over there and check that out. But besides that, the one thing that stood out to me was Noah Massey being as a slot receiver. I had heard talks about them wanting to maybe use him inside in the slot, and I think that's an interesting development just because of his size. You would automatically assume, that's an outside type guy when he's, 6'4", 230 plus pounds. But to use him inside is interesting. And I think especially when we're looking at West Virginia as a team that may try and, run the ball a little bit more, they could have some interesting packages with him in a slot position because he's probably going to be, able to have a good size advantage on whatever corner or linebacker he's lined up against there. So that could help, even for the screen game. Sorry, I got to whisper it because I know some people hate it so bad, but that could help a lot, having him or Cole Taylor flexed out, either one of those two in the slots, blocking for those screen passes. But, I thought that was interesting. He's in a competition to start there at the slot with Jarrell Williams and Grayson Malashevich, according to this depth chart. But also, like you said, I don't rule out Rodney Gallagher. Like, I know he's going to play some this year, but I wouldn't rule out, him or Jeremiah Aaron or even a Deshaun Polk maybe getting in that competition in the slot position there. Not that I don't have faith in Malashevich or Jarrell Williams or Noah Massey, but not a lot of experience among those three guys. So maybe you get Jeremiah Aaron over there, get a little bit more experience, or who knows, West Virginia does still have 2 scholarships remaining. You never know what they could do with those 2 scholarships. But yeah, I think a lot of this offense to me was kind of how I expected it to look. So let's flip over to the other side, a little bit of a discussion here on the defensive side. Now I think maybe we'll have a little bit more to talk about with this one. And of course, guys, like we said, this is a preseason depth chart. They got to put one in the media guide. A lot of this is subject to change once fall camp gets started, but it's fun for us to talk about here on the podcast for sure. So appreciate you guys tuning in here. Final episode of season 5. Great to have a depth chart to talk about as we get set for season 6 of the show and get set for fall camp. But having said that, Brad, defensively, what stands out to you? What do you think will change, or what would you like to see change?
Yeah. First comment, first couple comments on this is, if you see a name on this list right here, expect them to play. Kind of, in my opinion, I think that we've kind of built our defense around being multiple, and so that means a lot of these guys. I'm looking at the defensive ends off the jump, and you're going to see a lot of Sean Martin and Torres Simmons, but I also think that you're going to see a lot of Asani Redwood and Tamiwa Durajawe. You're looking at your, maybe not so much in your linebackers as much, but definitely when you start getting into your spears and your cornerbacks, I expect to see a lot of these guys play. I think that they're just different. I think they're variable, and I think that, I expect to see a lot of them play. But my second note on that is I'm just excited to see familiar names this time, around, because last year we just had so many new names, so many question marks. But, seeing guys like Malachi Ruffin, that I know put in quality snaps last year, really kind of stepped it up, got picked on at the beginning of the year, and was really able to kind of stand on his own at the end of the year. It might have been drawing a flag, but the man was not getting beat, 100 yards down the field. Things like that. Seeing Aubrey Burks and Lee Kapogba, having some consistency in the linebacker spot that we haven't seen in quite some time, it feels like, between him and like Jared Bartlett, and the weak side linebacker is definitely the glaring neon sign, as they would say nowadays. It's the popular term, the neon sign back there. But outside of that, it feels good to see a lot of familiar names.
Yeah, like you said, Bartlett feels like he's been there forever. 100% agree on that. But glad to have him, like you said, a familiar face back at the bandit position. I completely agree. A lot of, I guess you could say, more veterans to the Neil Brown regime here on this side of the depth chart. But I think, like you said, I'm still looking at that wheel linebacker position, that weak side linebacker position, wondering which one of those guys is going to step up. I think that all three have really good potential. It's just the lack of experience there. Jaffa Veras, I think, looked really good in the spring. Of course, Trey Lathan, we know his pedigree coming in as one of the higher rated recruits in the class last season. And then Ben Cutter's been raved about since he got on campus in the spring, and I think has a high ceiling for a true freshman, and definitely will see some snaps one way or another this upcoming season. But of course, that's the spot that you're looking at. And like I said, West Virginia is still with 2 scholarships remaining. If they were going to target something with one of those 2 scholarships, I certainly think linebacker would be the area they were looking at. But having said that, otherwise, what really stood out to me on this depth chart was I just found it interesting. And, I found it interesting in the spring, of course, when this happened, that they had Keyshawn Cobb sitting behind Aubrey Burks at the free safety position, because Aubrey Burks, obviously one of the best returning safeties in the country and in the Big 12 Conference. Obviously, we've talked about that a lot here on the channel in the past. But I thought Keyshawn Cobb was one of the West Virginia's better transfers in, so I was certainly expecting him to factor in as a starter on this defense. And like you said, Brad, I know they got a ton of different packages, and he's going to see the field one way or the other, but I would not be surprised to see him factor in at that spear position some. As same goes for Anthony Wilson or Beanie Bishop. I think all three of those guys got the opportunity to play some spear, especially Beanie Bishop when that spear kind of morphs into more of a nickel cornerback in passing situations. I think Beanie Bishop will be West Virginia's go-to slot cornerback, nickel cornerback this season. And to go along with the familiar faces you mentioned, I think to me, I like a lot of the players West Virginia added via transfer this offseason compared to the ones they added last year. Number one, they went and got a higher quantity of guys. And not only did they do that, I think that those guys are a lot better quality than the guys that they brought in last season. And especially in the secondary, I mentioned, those 3 guys all right there, Beanie Bishop, Keyshawn Cobb, and Anthony Wilson, all of which I think will play for the Mountaineers. And then, of course, you still got Montre Miller at the cornerback spot, who's competing to be a starter for the Mountaineers. And, I've been a big fan of his coming over from Kent State, nearly 900 snaps at the collegiate level, never committed a pass interference penalty. So, I love the familiar faces, like you said, but I'm really excited about a lot of the transfers in that we brought in. I think they're going to help this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should expect that. Like I said, when you see a senior sitting in second on the depth chart, especially guys that you're bringing in from a transfer, just like I said, expect them to play, expect to see them.
Oh yeah.
But it's good that we've got plenty of experience to back up our guys. You lose, heaven forbid, we have another experience like with Charles Woods last year. The fact that we've got some experience back there to kind of cover up those holes had they happen is a lot more confidence building than kind of the point we were at last year.
Yeah, I think that they were extra sure to have, kind of contingency plans in place after they saw that happen last season with Charles Woods. They didn't want to be stuck in that same type of situation. And so I think that's why you get guys that can play those multiple roles like you talked about, where you see these guys on the field, but also if something happens, you can shift, one of these guys from safety to corner and then be okay with it, or from safety to spear. So a lot of different roles for these guys in the secondary, and I think it's going to be a much improved secondary, and how could it not be, right? But having said that, got to take a look at the special teams, I guess, as well. I don't think there's too many surprises here on the special teams side. I know a lot of people were interested to see, who's going to be the kick returner, who's going to be the punt returner. I think Neil Brown straight up said at Big 12 Media Days, I know there's an or there in the depth chart between Preston Fox and Beanie Bishop at punt returner, but he announced Preston Fox had kind of won that job. Kick returner, I was certainly expecting Jashawn Polk. I think that's kind of the main reason they brought him in. Kickoff specialist, Michael Hayes. I think that's the main reason they brought him in, and he's competing with Danny King for place kicker. No big surprises, punter, holder, long snapper wise, but anything stand out to you there on the special team side of the depth chart, Brad?
No, I think we're just excited that Preston Fox is going to be the punt returner.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw him last year. I know he broke that big one that got called back, and he really looked impressive in those, a few games when they finally let him take over the job. So I'm excited to see a full season's worth. Hopefully, fingers crossed, he runs one back.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were screaming that for how many games last year?
It feels like 75% of the season or something.
Yeah, probably since like game 2.
Yeah, definitely feels like it. It was a while. But having said that, I guess I should share this preseason depth chart for you guys that are on the audio side and not getting to check it out visually. I'll just run through the two deep here on offense and defense. Quarterback, there's still an or in between Garrett Green and Nico on the depth chart. Running back, CJ is listed as the starter, Jalen Anderson as the backup. Then you get Justin Johnson and Jaheim White. Z wide receiver, you get Devin Carter, and then you get Jashawn Polk or Hudson Clement as the backup. H receiver there, Jeremiah Aaron, Rodney Gallagher as the backup. Left tackle, Wyatt Milam, Nick Malone behind him. Left guard, Thomas Remick, Bryce Biggs, or Maurice Hamilton there behind him. Center, we talked about Zach Frazier and Landon Livingston. Right guard, you still get an or between Brandon Yates or Jaquay Hubbard, and then Sully Weedman behind them. Right tackle, of course, Doug Nestor, Johnny Williams, the freshman listed as the backup there behind him. Tight end, you get Traylon Davis and Cole Taylor. And then that slot receiver position we were talking about earlier is an or in between all three of these guys, Grayson Malashevich, Jarrell Williams, and Noah Massey. And then on the other side, the X wide receiver, Cortez Braham, listed as the starter, with Preston Fox as the second teamer and E.J. Horton, the transfer in from Marshall, as the third teamer. And then defensively, flipping over onto the other side, defensive tackle, Eddie V. And then you get Jalen Thornton or Day Hawkins behind him. Nose tackle, Mike Lockhart, followed by Hammond Russell and Fatorma Mobo. Defensive end, you get Sean Martin, and then you get an or in between Torres Simmons, Asani Redwood, and Tomiwa Durage. Bandit position, Jared Bartlett, as we discussed earlier, and then an or in between Tyron Bradley and true freshman James Hurd. The will linebacker, competition between Jaffa Veras and Trey Lathan as an or in between both of those names. Mike linebacker, Lee Koba, backed up by Tyreek Austin Cave and Caden Bizer. The spear position, an or in between all three of these names, so still undecided there between Lance Dixon, Hershey McLaurin, and Raleigh Collins. Left side cornerback, you got an or in between Andrew Wilson Lamp and Montre Miller. Free safety, Aubrey Burks, backed up by Keyshawn Cobb currently. Cat safety, Marcus Floyd, backed up by Anthony Wilson and Christian Stokes. And then on the other side, you get three players competing for the right cornerback spot in Malachi Ruffin, Beanie Bishop, and Jacoby Spells. So for those of you listening on the audio side, so you guys can get a taste of the preseason depth chart. Like I said, subject to change heavily here over the next couple of weeks as fall camp gets started soon. But for our main topic here on our final episode of season 5, thought it'll be a fun discussion point to take a look at that preseason depth chart and provide our thoughts there. But would love to hear your all's thoughts as well. So if you are tuned in on the YouTube side, drop them in the comments. We really appreciate those interactions, as we're always trying to grow the Country Roads Webcast community here throughout Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, Brad, I guess we'll get ready to wrap things up here for season 5 of the Country Roads Webcast. Hard to believe the CRW pod's about to have 5 seasons in the book now at the close of this one. But having said that, anything we didn't touch on you wanted to mention, or basketball, baseball, football wise, anything at all there, anything you want to plug, have the floor, my friend.
No, man, it felt like a pretty good coverage. I'd say it's definitely a fun way to end season 5 here. So it's been a great 3 years with you guys, or maybe even 4. I don't even remember how long I've been here now. I've been here, you know.
Been around for a minute.
But, you know, I think this might be my 4th roundtable. Anyway, but yeah, it's been exciting. And like I said, I'm definitely glad to be getting back around here a little bit more and be able to support the crew a little bit. And, yeah, man, excited to get it into football season.
Absolutely, man. It's finally about here, you know, the season prediction roundtable coming up. As Brad mentioned, that'll be our first episode to kick off season 6, releasing soon, as you see here behind me on the fancy new whiteboard. Season 6, episode 160 will be our season prediction roundtable. Hoping to have some special guests on again this season, and that's always one of my favorite episodes of every season. Just going through the schedule game by game, and we come up with our win-loss records for West Virginia football for the upcoming season. And it's always fun to see how each of us see things turning out, and then, of course, tracking it throughout the season and seeing who ends up coming the closest to being most right. And Brad, I believe you took that title last season, got the most games correct. So trying to defend the title this year is I
think I've actually done it 2 years in a row now. Because the one year,
I think so,
because last year, the year before last, I predicted us to go 10-2, which did not happen. Fun fact, guys, we did not go 10-2 in the 2022 season, but or 2021 season. But I did get more of the games right than the rest of the guys. So, I said I think I held on to it pretty strong last year too. So
got Big Bubba Brad going for the 3-peat then in this year's CRW season prediction.
Yeah, I have no idea where I'm going to go at with it this year. So
yeah, that's why I'm interested. I think this is going to be one of the. I don't want to say the first year, but one of the more interesting years since we've done it, throughout the podcast history, because I think that there's going to be a lot of variation between people's picks.
Yeah, because it's like I've been preaching this whole entire, is Neil Brown fired by week 5, or are we 5-2 going into week 5?
Well, it's interesting because that kind of will depend a lot on how you're thinking about it. Because if you're thinking he gets fired, that could change things. But if he doesn't get fired and they keep him around, the back half of the schedule is a lot easier than the front half as well. So it's going to be interesting to see not only how the season shapes out, obviously, but how our predictions shape out.
Personally, and I'll give you guys a little insight of where my brain's at. I think it comes down to one game, and it's going to be a smelly one. You know what I mean? So.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking
of a little nod to that.
I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully you guys are as well. Be on the lookout for that episode 160 season prediction roundtable releasing, here in early August, hopefully within the next couple of weeks or so. So be on the lookout for that. In between now and of course September 1st, gonna have at least a couple more CRW episodes coming out, the season prediction roundtable, and then we'll get into the fun stuff when we start getting into our game preview and recap episodes with our Penn State preview. So season's finally here. We're wrapping up season 5, heading into season 6 here on the CRW, and appreciate you guys coming along for the ride with us, whether you're tuning in on the video side or listen to us on the audio side. We appreciate you tuning in on any one of those platforms. Be sure to check us out on social media, Country Roads Webcast, Facebook and Instagram, at WVU Country Roads on Twitter, and be sure head over to WVSportsNow.com for all your Mountaineer sports coverage and needs there. But having said that, until next time, when it will be season 6 of the CRW podcast for one final time in season 5 for Big Bubba Brad and myself. Until next time, let's go Mountaineers.
If you really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those